I want to come back to a story I mentioned briefly yesterday about the state of the Bruce Highway south of Gladstone after that massive chemical explosion. By now you'll know that the Bruce has been closed since the blast erupted at Baroran because a truck carrying ammonium nitrate hit a ute, killing the ute's 21-year-old driver and leaving a 5-metre deep hole in the ground. Now, the government says it's rapidly working to repair and reopen the road, but we found out yesterday, courtesy of my next special guest here on 4BC Drive, that as part of the repairs, the government is planning to undertake a cultural heritage inspection before it actually fixes the highway. Now, the government says that inspection hasn't caused any delay to the road reopening and that it's actually commonplace in state infrastructure projects. But my question today is, why do we even need this at all? A cultural heritage inspection just to fix the road. James Ashby is Federal One Nation Senator Pauline Hanson's Chief of Staff. He's also running as a candidate in the seat of Keppel in this year's Queensland election. He joins me on the line now. James, thanks for your time.
Hey, Gleeso. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I just want to read you out what the department is saying, or certainly what Bart Mellish's office is saying. They're saying an official cultural heritage report was not required as part of the inspections. Given the potential for construction activities, due diligence cultural heritage inspections were undertaken to ensure no artefacts or scarred trees are located in the immediate vicinity. They say that these inspections have had no delay or impact on the reopening of the Bruce Highway and significant progress is being made, and they expect to open to single-lane traffic the highway by midnight tonight. What do you make of all that?
Well, the mere fact that they're undertaking these cultural heritage reports in the first place on a highway that has been in existence for 90 years come December. 90 years, Gleeso. What are they hoping to find? Are they worried that explosion, maimed the rainbow serpent or what? I just don't get it. And I don't care what the minister says. It does delay the process of getting reopened.
Yeah. James, I think the concern among many of my listeners is that this cultural heritage stuff seems to be happening more and more frequently in Queensland. We see it around native title, around land claims, place name changes like Gari. And, of course, Queensland voted 7 out of 10 no to the voice. Do you think it's gone too far?
Well, it has. And finally, the Courier Mail helped bell the cat this week by releasing that statement from Transport and Main Roads when they said they were undertaking a cultural heritage report before they reopened the highway or before at least they started the repairs. But the public is starting to get a bit of an understanding of what the mining industry have been putting up for more than a decade with, because that's why mines have gone from a 6-month approval process to, in some cases, as long as 17 years, because a lot of this stuff comes into the approval process. And the state government is starting to impose this on developers. Anytime you want to move a bit of soil, you've got to go through one of these cultural heritage reports. And it's just completely unfair. It adds to the costs of doing business. And as for building highways here in Queensland, mate, just to give you some indication, it's around about $3.8 million to $5.4 million now per kilometre, per lane, to do highways in Queensland. And that came off the back of a report that was done in the federal parliament. And whereas if you have a look at the cost of doing highways in places like India or China, their cost per kilometre of 4 lanes is only $1.3 million. So it all adds to the cost, and this is why our taxes continue to go up. And, this is why the excise on fuel continues to go up as well. For over 50 cents a litre, that should be going towards roads. It now goes into consolidated revenue. There's no commitment from the state or federal to spend that on the roads. But the mere fact is, this is why the Bruce Highway is a basket case, and this is why it hasn't been duplicated from Brisbane to Cairns. Lots of promises, but never any commitment. And sadly, it's regional Queensland that pay the price, and worse still, they're paying the price with their lives.
James, you mentioned the Bruce Highway and the fact that it hasn't been properly funded, and we've seen stories even today suggesting that the Palaszczuk government, even as far back as 2017, promised that they'd upgrade the highway. By the time this particular stretch of that highway reopens, 5 days will have passed since that explosion. And what impact does that have from an economic and probably from a morale perspective for the good folk of that area?
When you've got fresh produce that has to come from up north to the Brisbane markets, for example, that all adds to time delays. But more importantly, medical supplies. We know that there's been issues with trying to get saline to hospitals across the state. We know that medical supplies to chemists have been low for some time now. And when you've got these highway closures for 5 days, and you're right, it's 5 days today since that incident occurred, and we're still having to send trucks in on inland roads that really aren't up to it. I took the caravan down the Leichhardt Highway last year, and mate, the damage it did to not just the car but the caravan as well. I can only imagine what these trucking companies are going through, let alone people with ordinary everyday sedans, because mate, you've just talked to anyone who's done the Bruce Highway recently, and I refuse to take my own car down there now. I really do. I end up getting a hire car. I know it costs me a few extra bucks to do, but if I've got to do the run down in the car, I get a hire car because I think, I've done that many windscreens. I've come close to blowing out tyres because of potholes. And we're talking potholes as long as 3 metres and half a metre in depth. There's some of the potholes we're measuring at the moment up here, just north of Rocky. And so this is what motorists have got to put up with. It's just shocking. It's a bad look for both sides of politics. We've got to lay down the swords and stop using the Bruce Highway as a political football. And I think we've got to go down a bipartisan approach here and sit down and just say, as politicians, right, we're going to make a commitment for the next 20 years. We'll do 100 kilometres a year. We'll do 50 kilometres at each end. And over the next 20 years, we'll all know that the Bruce Highway will be duplicated from Brisbane all the way to Cairns. It's 1,800 kilometres worth of work. But I think if you take a bipartisan approach to this, we can make sure that the main arterial road through our state is up to scratch. And, mate, if you've got good roads, you'll find people are quite prepared to move to regional areas like where I live because they know that they can safely traverse across the state. And they know they'll get there in a timely fashion.
I just had a text from Graham from Rochedale, James. He says, this whole cultural heritage inspection sounds like an episode from the ABC's Utopia. Now, I'm sure you'd empathise with that. Before we go, you're running for the state seat of Keppel in the upcoming state election. We were just 53 days away.
Yeah.
David Crisafulli sailing along beautifully in the polls, looking like he will be Premier after October 26. What are you hearing in Keppel?
Like, crime continues to be an issue, but the biggest issue I actually see, I think crime can be fixed up within 12, 18 months, right? But I see the biggest issue at the moment across this state, particularly in regional parts where I am, is health. We have got no ear, nose and throat specialists. We haven't got any cardiac specialists. If you want a paediatrician because you've got young kids, good luck. We've got to fly all these people in. So, as we get an ageing demographic here, we're finding our hospitals that are at capacity. But if you want specialist treatment, you've got to go to Brisbane. And our nursing homes are at capacity. There's a 2-year wait up here if you want to get into a nursing home. And good luck if you've got health complications, mate. You've got more chance of having a baby on the highway because we've got no maternity ward in Yeppoon, none in Gladstone, none in Billow. So all this pressure's on Rocky. I think health is the biggest issue that Queensland faces right now, and that is going to be something David Crisafulli faces. I think that he's got to be realistic with the people of Queensland when he gets in. I think he needs to say to people, we can't fix this overnight. No one expects him to. But I think there needs to be, for the entire term of the next government, must be a full focus on fixing the health system because it's buggered. The more remote you go, the more buggered it becomes.
James Ashby, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Gleeso.
There is James Ashby. He's the One Nation candidate for Keppel. Keep an eye on Keppel on election night. That'll be a really fierce battle. One Nation traditionally do very well in that seat. And I'd say whoever wins the primary between the LNP and, of course, James Ashby will probably finish up with the seat. It's 3:45.